Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at York Regional Police Headquarters for this press conference. Today we will be sharing information about Project Norte, an investigation into an international labor trafficking ring, the details of which I'm sure you'll find poignant and compelling. Our speakers today, to my left, are as follows. Alvaro Almeida, York Regional Police Deputy Chief of Investigations, followed by Gary McBride, Unit Commander of the York Regional Police Human Trafficking Section. And next is David Gloss, CBSA, Director of Intelligence and Investigations, followed by Jasmine Defina, who is a Human Trafficking Specialist with Victim Services of York Region. Following these presentations, there will be a question and answer session, and I would ask that you direct your questions to a specific member of this panel. Just say who you'd like to ask it to, and then ask your question. Following this, we will have an opportunity for some one-on-one Q&A. We will get to that. So, right now, I will turn it over to the Deputy Chief.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to York Regional Police Headquarters. Thank you for attending today. The information we're about to share with you on Project Norte is as disturbing as it is compelling. When you hear the term human trafficking, you often think of sex trafficking of women and children, and you'd be right. But human trafficking also refers to organized trafficking of people, sometimes foreign workers, by crime groups operating across international borders. These workers are coerced with promises of a better life, decent wages, quality housing, and eventually documentation. These are almost always false promises. As Detective Sergeant McBride will detail shortly, the victims in this case, 64 of them, were subject to deplorable living and working conditions with no way out. People that have been trafficked and exploited in this way are often desperate. They're scared to seek help, worried that they may be the ones arrested and deported, and fearful of retribution from their traffickers. We're here today to provide the details of this investigation, but more importantly, we're here to send a message to anyone finding themselves in a similar situation. And that message is, we are here to help. Nosotros estamos aquí para ayudarte. Police, CBSA, Victim Services of York Region, and the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking are only a few of the organizations able to help. York Regional Police is experienced in large-scale investigations, but as a result of the sheer number of victims and their needs for supports, we are grateful for their assistance. Of the numerous community groups who provided shelter, food, clothing, medical assistance, and other supports. I also want to point out that this case has affected everyone profoundly. Our members were shocked at the conditions that the victims were living in and wanted nothing more to do anything they could to assist them. I am proud of the compassion of our members that our members have displayed, as well as the members of our partner agencies that have been assisting us. I hope the victims understand that our compassion is genuine, that the assistance is available as long as they need. I want to appeal to the members of the media to help us raise awareness about labor trafficking and its terrible consequences. If anyone suspects a farm, factory, warehouse, or any other business mistreating foreign workers, please report it to the police or to the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. If anyone knows someone that could be a victim, please reach out for assistance. And if you yourself find yourself in this situation, know that there are agencies out there willing to help and contact us. Finally, to our partner agencies, investigations of this magnitude could not be a success without the assistance and cooperation of our partners. Canadian Border Services Agency and the Provincial Human Trafficking Intelligence-led Joint Force Strategy members, as well as members of the Toronto Police Service and the Peel Regional Police Service and their human trafficking investigation sections. And a special thanks to Victim Services of York Region and the other community support organizations and the Mexican Consular Authority for their invaluable assistance in assisting these victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Almeida. Our next speaker is Gary McBride, Unit Commander of the York Regional Police Human Trafficking Section.
Afternoon, everyone. As Sergeant Whitney just introduced me, I'm Detective Sergeant Gary McBride from York Regional Police Human Trafficking Section. So Project Norte began in November 2022 as a joint labor human trafficking investigation between York Regional Police and the Canada Border Services Agency. York Regional Police Human Trafficking Section received a complaint from one Mexican national about his work and living conditions in Canada. Human trafficking investigators spoke with other Mexican nationals who also provided similar facts that indicated they were exploited by an organized labor trafficking crime group operating in York Region and across the GTA. The foreign laborers described incidents of false promises, which included documentation, quality of housing, their work hours, and their pay. They also described living in deplorable conditions, including overcrowding, with dozens of people sleeping on mattresses on the floor, a lack of food, a lack of privacy, and bug infestations. They also described forms of coercion and control, which included isolation, a lack of freedom, being financially bound, threats, and sexual assault. York Regional Police and the Canada Border Services Agency engaged in a joint investigation due to the international aspect of this investigation. The Provincial Human Trafficking Intelligence-Led Joint Forces Strategy, known as IJFS, their members also provided support throughout this investigation. Investigators worked together over a 3-month period to identify the methods of the organized labor trafficking crime group, identify their members, and also their locations where the workers were residing. Investigators observed the organized group house foreign laborers across the GTA and transport them in a fleet of vehicles, which included buses to various work locations in the GTA, including farms, factories, and warehouses. The investigation by the Ministry of Labor is still being conducted, and as such, the work locations and company names will not be shared today. On February 8th, 2023, human trafficking investigators from York Regional Police, the OPP, Toronto Police, and Peel Regional Police executed search warrants at locations in East Gwillimbury, Vaughan, Toronto, and Mississauga. These locations included a farm, a large estate home, a bungalow, a townhouse, and a condominium. 5 accused were located either at these locations or actively transporting foreign workers to their work locations. The 5 charged include Trey Trin and T. Kim Huen Vu of Vaughan, both of who are Canadian citizens. Also charged are Jesus Navarrete Garcia, Montserrat Monteras Ibarra, and Hiram Martinez Rodriguez, who are all Mexican nationals. Warrants have also been issued for Juan de Jesus Rosales Gomez, and Luis Alberto Garcia Galvan. On February 8th, 2023, investigators also located 64 foreign workers. Spanish-speaking members from YRP, CBSA, and the OPP were present to answer any questions and, most importantly, to allay any fears that day. The workers were then offered an opportunity to come to a victim assistance center, which was set up in York Region and was the result of a partnership with a local faith-based group. 53 of those 64 foreign workers accepted the offer of assistance and were transported to the Victim Assistance Center, where again, Spanish members of police and CBSA were available to answer questions. Community partners, including Victim Services of York Region, were also present to provide additional clothing, as well as interim housing for those who required it. York Region paramedic services were also present to deal with any medical issues. A local business also assisted us by preparing Mexican-style food at the center throughout the day. The Mexican consulate in Toronto has also been in contact with their citizens to provide support and services as required. York Regional Police are asking other victims of labor trafficking to come forward. Any victims of labor human trafficking who are hesitant to come forward due to immigration status concerns should be aware that they have the right to support and protection under the laws in Canada. For anyone who still has concerns about speaking with the police, there are community supports available which will assist foreign workers, and there's also the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking, who can connect victims with services across Canada and also provide legal advice. We also want to remind the public that vulnerable people may be living in our communities and may be working right beside you. Please help break the chains of human trafficking by reporting suspicions to police, other government agencies, Crime Stoppers, or the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant McBride. Our next speaker is David Gloss, CBSA Director of Intelligence and Investigations. Sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming and joining us here today. My name is David Gloss. I am the Director of Intelligence and Investigations for the Canadian Border Services Agency, the CBSA, here in the Greater Toronto Area region. I want to start off by thanking our partners at York Regional Police, the Ontario Provincial Police, the Toronto Police Service, Peel Regional Police, as well as the CBSA team for all of the hard work they put into Project Norte. The CBSA became involved in this operation in November of 2022, when an international border element was identified. Our surveillance operations helped to identify dwellings, conveyances, and persons of concern that helped to advance this joint investigation with York Regional Police. Once the police engaged the CBSA, our intelligence and investigations team conducted surveillance and shared intelligence that resulted in the identification of 5 dwellings. As part of our role in managing Canada's borders, the CBSA works with our federal partners through the public safety-led national strategy to combat human trafficking. Our officers are trained in interview, examination, and investigative techniques to help identify suspected human trafficking. They use proven indicators, advanced information, intelligence, innovative technology, and information sharing to carry out this mandate. The CBSA works closely with our local, national, and international law enforcement partners, as well as other government departments here in Canada, and we share relevant information on border and national security issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director. And next is Jasmine Defina from Victim Services of York Region, Human Trafficking Specialist.
Good morning. My name is Jasmine Defina. I am the Human Trafficking Specialist at Victim Services of York Region. Victim Services of York Region is a nonprofit charitable organization that works in partnership with police to provide 24/7 crisis intervention support to persons that are victimized by crime or tragic circumstance. As an independent organization, we attend a home, hospital, police station, or crime scene to assist on cases of human trafficking, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, homicide, suicide, traffic fatalities, and much more. We are funded in part by the Ministry of Children and Community Services, United Way of Greater Toronto Area, the Town of Richmond Hill Lottery Trust Bingo, and rely on funding and community donations to provide this essential care to vulnerable survivors. In this particular case, involving over 50 survivors of human labor trafficking, our office worked closely with York Regional Police right from the beginning of the investigation to prepare and mobilize community supports and services to ensure that this was a victim-centric approach. Through the ministry's Victim Quick Response Program, Victim Services of York Region was able to access and secure emergency funding for temporary accommodations, food, clothing, essential hygiene items for each survivor. Our crisis counselors worked with individuals to build rapport and trust, which is essential. Given prior to being rescued, these survivors were governed by threat and fear and kept in deplorable living standards. The survivors feared that they would be charged and deported, as this is a normal fear for survivors of human trafficking. It is standard threat used by traffickers. Through relationship building, our team was then able to invite other community partners to a centralized hub where seamless services could be offered, including legal, financial, and housing. Our crisis counselors are working tirelessly along with service providers to assist each and every person. These survivors are so humble, respectful, kind, and gentle. They just wish to provide financial supports to their families. If you wish to support Victim Services of York Region, the work that we do, and the clients that we assist, please visit our website at victimservices-york.org for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have a question and answer period. Please direct your question to who you'd like to answer it, and the panel is right here for you.
So just speaking in generalities, of the 64 plus people we encountered, it was a mix of men and women, as labor trafficking is quite different than sex trafficking. And the range is from people in their 20s right through their 40s. It really is, it's not a one specific group, it really is a variety of victims that's being found in this case. I don't have specifically what states they're from in Mexico, but they are all Mexican nationals. You know, it really would vary depending on the person. It's a very unique situation to each person involved. It's not just one, as though all 64 arrived on one day. It's various people from various states throughout the investigation. No, I don't know what their jobs were down in Mexico. So here, the information we're providing is that they were working in factories, warehouses, and farms. That part of the investigation is still being looked into. It has become a bit of a web, so just trying to unravel that web to really understand the full story. Just generalized, as we're still trying to investigate that aspect, correct? People are generally okay, but as mentioned already, our partners from York Paramedic Services were on hand to provide any immediate or long-term care that was necessary that day. That I'm not sure where they all are at this moment. Yeah, it might actually be better from CBSA because that's really the aspect that they deal with.
Thank you for the question. So the investigation is continuing, so I'm not at liberty to discuss any details yet, but as we mentioned before, we are taking a victim-centric approach on this case, and there's empathy for these victims, so that is our primary concern, as well as the organizers that are behind this. So, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 64 people, through labor trafficking and the charges that are being laid of human trafficking, that really revolves around the coercion, the control of these people, and that coercion control can take many forms, obviously, but ultimately it comes down to their fear, and that can be quantified in different ways, but their fear, and a lot of it can be exploited based on their vulnerabilities. They're here in a foreign country, they don't speak our language, they don't know where to go and access assistance or food in that case, or appropriate housing. So they really are in our communities and they're vulnerable. That helps expedite their exploitation. Yeah. 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 So for the financial aspect, part of that, like all police investigations, is still being unraveled to this point. And a lot of that gets unraveled through our partners such as FinTrack, who helps us track that monetary flow throughout Canada. As far as our officers, I know the Deputy Chief alluded to it. I can't remember an investigation that I've seen in my career in York Regional Police where I've seen this many of our officers impacted. The officers, I think, really saw themselves, especially our Spanish-speaking officers, they really saw themselves and their families in those types of situations as they were speaking with them and learning about how they were exploited in Canada and where they've come from and the situation down there. Yeah, that part is still being investigated, how they were actually recruited and the process that they undertook in Mexico in order to really come to Canada for a better life is the way to sum it up. Yeah. That part is still being unraveled, how long that's been in process for. Just this specific investigation started in November 2022, leading up till February when search warrants were executed and people were arrested for this investigation. For us, based on this investigation, the people we have arrested are the people that we were seeking out specific to this operation only. Yeah. No, so warrants have been issued for both of those people who are both Mexican nationals. The warrants were issued because we're not sure of their whereabouts at the moment. That's why the warrant was issued. That's correct. Everyone has been arrested and charged that was named otherwise. Yeah, so on the day of search warrant, there were 5 locations where search warrants were executed. East Gwillimbury, which is just north of headquarters where you are today. Vaughan, which is also in York Region, the city of Toronto, and in Mississauga as well. That part of the investigation with the employers is still being investigated, just to try and unravel some of those questions for ourselves and our investigators. No, as the CBSA just alluded to, they do have rights and protections in Canada as they're victims of human trafficking, and as CBSA just alluded to, they are not deporting anyone, but CBSA can maybe expand on that answer if you wish. Yeah.
So as the detective sergeant said, excuse me, there are laws to protect the victims, and we do actually refer them to Immigration Refugee Center Canada, RCC, for possible interviews for temporary resident visas, etc. And as I said before, we are taking a victim-centric approach with this, with the case, and especially with the victims of this trafficking. So.
And I know you mentioned this earlier, but is there any way, has the investigation looked at where these people were lured from and how they were enticed into coming to Canada?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that is part of the investigation, just to determine really the flow of these people into Canada. Obviously, that portion didn't take place in Canada, it took place in Mexico, but that will ultimately be part of the investigation, working with some of some including CBSA, to really figure out that part of the investigation.
And would that include sort of cutting the source off, like the, sort of something in Mexico that has to be done, or?
That will just be part of the investigation about obviously who's responsible in Mexico, and really on our side, what can Canadian law enforcement do?
Thank you.